guys is going to get chosen. Okay, so here's the first Mercury flight. Happened on May 5th, 1961. May 5th, 1961. And it was referred to as a suborbital flight. What does that mean? What's a suborbital flight? Suborbital. Substitute teacher is not what? A full teacher, it's a substitute. So what would be a suborbital flight? Would it be all the way around the world? No. Partial. And it could amount to very little or almost all the way around. We'll see. So it was considered a suborbital flight. And the name of the flight was Freedom 7. Freedom 7, which was probably displayed on the capsule. Freedom 7. Now this is a really small, but this is what the thing looks like. Okay, but where's the capsule? Very top. The rest of this disparts as it goes into space. It all, falls off. So the capsule is just this really little thing, and this antenna even falls off. So it's just this part right here, just the very top of the rocket. Okay, and that's a Mercury rocket. Those others are Apollo. But anyway, so this is what happens. Well, the Freedom 7 was commanded by Shepard Jr. So he will have the distinction of becoming the first American in space. Shepard Jr. What branch of the service did he come from? And what was his age?
35.
And what was his rank? Very good. Right. So Shepard Jr. will pilot or command Freedom 7. So he becomes the first American in space. He basically just rocketed 117 miles into space and landed 15 minutes later. So it's a very, very short suborbital flight. Yep, he went 117 miles into space and basically parachuted back into the ocean 15 minutes. The flight was about, he was in space about 15 minutes and down. Okay? Now, Freedom 7 weighed 3,000 pounds and reached a top speed of 5,180 miles per hour during the flight. So Freedom 7 weighed approximately 3,000 pounds and reached a top speed of 5,180 miles per hour. Now, 5,180 miles per hour. Now, can you imagine sitting on the launch pad on this little tiny capsule, maybe a little bit bigger than you, strapped onto that kind of power, about ready to get shot into space for the first time ever? You're the lucky guy that gets this deal. Well, because of his nervousness, Shepard made a quote that went down in aviation history as Shepard's prayer. Shepard's prayer. So before takeoff, just before the engines ignited, just shortly before, maybe even a little bit during, he made a quote that went down in aviation history as Shepard's prayer. Anybody know what the quote was? It came over the loudspeaker to NASA. Anybody heard this? He said, quote, "Please, dear God, don't let me F up." And he didn't use the F, he didn't say it like I did. If you can, he got the whole, he gave the whole, he went for the gusto. Don't abbreviate when you're really nervous. So just before the engine started and he realized, uh-oh, this is it, he made the quote, "Please, dear God, don't let me F up," which went down in aviation history as Shepard's prayer. Well, obviously he went up and down in space and came back safely. I'll tell you a little bit about what happened to him after that. He basically was grounded from 1963 to 1969 because he had developed an ear disorder, which was not good in spaceflight. From 1963 to 1969, he was grounded because of an ear disorder. He had something wrong with his ear, and that would not work real well as an astronaut. But he got that problem taken care of. And in 1972, he commanded Apollo 14. I'll explain that to you. Which was man's third successful moon landing. Not first, third. So Alan Shepard was grounded from 1963 to 69 because of an ear disorder. He got that corrected, and in 1972 he commanded Apollo 14, which was the third time man landed on the moon. Now, the space program, you don't have to write this down, it went from Mercury to the Gemini project to the Apollo project. With the Apollo mission, the one that was going to land on the moon, but all these prepared for that. But anyway, that's Shepard. When he was on the moon during Apollo 13, and you'll see this at the Air and Space Museum when we get there, he took a 6-iron and he hit 2 golf balls on the surface of the moon, and he described they went for miles and miles because he hit them and they just kept going because of the gravity situation and going and going. So he hit 2 golf balls on the moon with a 6-iron, and that 6-iron is in the National Air and Space Museum, and you'll get a chance to see it when you're there. It's pretty cool. Now that wasn't during the Mercury flight. I'm just going ahead of myself. That was during the Apollo 14. He resigned from the Navy in 1974. He had the rank of Rear Admiral, which is a very high rank. So he retired from the United States Navy in 1974 with the rank of Rear Admiral, and unfortunately he died of leukemia at the age of 74. So he resigned from the Navy in 1974 at the rank of Rear Admiral, later dying at the age of 74 of leukemia. He had been married 53 years to his wife at the time of his death. 53 years.
How old was
He was 74. And his wife of 53 years died 5 weeks later. And both were cremated and their ashes were committed to the what? To the sea. Because he's a Navy man. Okay? So, Alan Shepard resigned from the Navy in 1974 at the rank of Rear Admiral. He later died of leukemia at the age of 74. His wife of 53 years died 5 weeks after he died. Both were cremated and their ashes were committed to the sea, which is a normal Navy ritual. Okay? All right, we'll cover one more today, maybe 2, we'll see. The next one occurred on July 21st, 1961. July 21st, 1961. It also was considered a suborbital flight, and it was called Liberty Bell 7. Liberty Bell 7. Who was it commanded by? You got a 1 in 6 chance. Virgil Gus Grissom commanded Liberty Bell 7. So he becomes what? Second American in space, third human in space. So on July 21st, 1961, a suborbital flight, Liberty Bell 7, was commanded by Virgil Gus Grissom. And he becomes the second American in space, and he goes 118 miles into space and lands about 15 minutes later. So he just upped Shepard by 1 mile. But he had a little problem upon splashdown, because they splash into the ocean and then they're picked up by usually American destroyers. Well, while he landed in the ocean, the hatch came open accidentally and his spacecraft filled with water and sank. And he got out just in time and was rescued by a helicopter after nearly drowning, because usually the helicopters come in and kind of make sure everything's okay, and then the ship comes and they bring him up on the helicopter and put him on the ship. Well, his capsule, the emergency hatch, blew open accidentally and filled with water, and he had to be rescued by the helicopter. He almost drowned. And they later, I have an article on that, I'll look it up, they later went into the ocean and recovered that maybe 10 years ago. The Liberty Bell 7 brought it up. So what did Grissom do after his famous flight? He also flew in the Gemini project, which was the next one after Mercury. And he also was scheduled to fly in the first Apollo mission, Apollo 1. Apollo 1. So he served in the Gemini project. And he also was a crew member of Apollo 1. And he's the guy on the left right here. Well, unfortunately for he and the other 2 crew members, which we'll talk about, they were doing a routine sweep kind of through to check all of the functions of the spacecraft while it was on the launch pad. something sparked a fire. They couldn't get the hatches open, and all 3 of the Apollo 1 astronauts were burnt to death on the launch pad, including Gus Grissom. So he was killed when Apollo 1, when a fire swept through their command module during a test on the launch pad. We will visit his gravesite in Arlington. We will visit his gravesite, Virgil Gus Grissom. I get kind of this one says it's pretty awesome. So he's buried in Arlington. Okay? And we'll talk more about that later. Okay, we're going to get one more in just because I like to. February 20th, 1962. This was an orbital flight, which meant what?
All the way around.
All the way around.
Can you tell me the date?
Yeah. February 20th, 1962, orbital flight Friendship 7.
That's cute. It's so good.
And so the person that's going to fly this is going to be the first American to orbit the Earth. Not the first human, but the first American. And it was John Glenn Jr. John Glenn Jr. becomes the first American to orbit the Earth. He circled the Earth 3 times in just a little less than 5 hours. So he beat Yuri Gagarin in the number of times around the Earth. He went 3 times around in a little less than 5 hours. Now this was big to Americans. Why? We kind of caught up. Matter of fact, we actually even did a little bit better because he went around 3 times compared to Gagarin's once. So this was a big morale boost for Americans. It helped overcome some of the fears that the Russians were winning the race for space. We were getting even, or maybe we even took a little bit of a lead. Now this would be worth a t-shirt for sure. I owe somebody some t-shirts there. I got to remember that. Why did he never fly again and resign from the Mercury project in 1964? Why did he never fly again? Because he became quite a hero after this. Why did he never fly? He never flew again until he was in his 70s. He went up in his 70s on the space shuttle. Why did he never fly again? Why did he not fly from that date to just recently when he was in his 70s? Why did he never fly again? Perfectly capable hero, big-time hero. Why did he never fly again? Somebody grounded him. Who grounded him? What?
Kennedy.
President Kennedy grounded him. Why? Why would he do that? Why would he ground a guy that just made history in space, put us even, maybe a little even ahead in the space?
He was like a hero for the Americans, so if he died or something happened to him, then they would like...
Mickelson, that's exactly right. He was such a hero in space, the space program, Kennedy was afraid this was not easy duty. This was high risk. And he did not want the new American hero to be killed in space. So he grounded him, and finally when he was in his 70s, he trained and was granted permission to go up on one of the space shuttle missions, which was a big deal in history. Very good. Now, as I mentioned before, he was elected to the United States Senate in 1974, and he served until 1998. He was elected to the Senate, and he served until 1998.
When was he elected to the Senate?
74. And he retired in 1998, still lives today. One of the pallbearers at Bobby Kennedy's funeral, by the way. Okay, who do I owe t-shirts to that I was given a bad time to today? Mickelson for sure. Anybody else? Now you never ask a girl, you never throw them a shirt and guess the size. I got large and medium. They're going to shrink a little. What would you like? Okay.
My medium like goes to my knees.
I know, but put it in hot water.
Mine didn't shrink, by the way.
Did it shrink?
No, not really. It's still about 5 sizes too big.
Let some man do it for you. There you go. All right, any questions? Okay, tomorrow we'll tell you about the rest of the flights. One of these astronauts not going to get a fly. We got one that's not going to be able to fly, and we'll tell you tomorrow who that is.